So what did the parties mean for it to mean? To form a more perfect union. More perfect than what? More perfect than our first Constitution. Does anybody know we had a Constitution before this one? What was it called? Articles of Confederation. They were our Constitution for 8 years, and they were the Constitution that our founders were living under until the day that the 9th state ratified the new Constitution. Congress waited till 11 states had ratified because we kind of wanted New York and Virginia on board. And then we determined we were going to start the new Constitution and implement that. It is more perfect than our first Constitution. What they meant was they wanted it to be a stronger alliance of independent nation states. That was the intent of the founders. How do we know that? Well, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, the Treaty of Paris, all of these documents refer to the states in the plural and name them. Why would they name them unless they were in separate and independent states? When King George signed the Treaty of Paris, he said, "I grant independence to Massachusetts Bay Colony. I grant independence to New York." He didn't say, "I grant independence to North America." The United States was intended to be plural, and it's used that way every time in the Constitution. Sometimes people are reading my modern version and they said, "Well, that's awkward. It said the United States, they." Well, that's what our founders said, and so I kept it in the translation. So what did it mean, a more perfect union? More perfect than our first Constitution, a stronger alliance of independent nation states, stronger but strictly limited, or the legal term is called cabined, where the powers of the new government are kept within boundaries. How do we know? We know from the internal evidence, which is the text of the Constitution, and the external evidence, which is the ratifying documents, the comments of the writers, and other underlying documents. And that's the way we would go after any literature if we were doing what we call exegesis of that literature. And this is a little bit technical, but I want you to just try to follow along because you'll have your mind around this in a better way. The internal evidence, the text of the Constitution, if you have yours, Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1, the first 5 words of the Constitution. All legislative powers herein granted. After the preamble, the first 5 words of the Constitution are all legislative powers herein granted. Well, I asked a group of 4th graders, what does herein granted mean? And then I felt stupid because they won't know. Little girl raised her hand. I called on her. She said, "Granted in here?" I said, "Sweetheart, come sit up front." People get it. All legislative power granted in here will be vested in a Congress. Then Article 1, Section 8 is the enumerated powers. Why would we bother to number them if they were intended to be unlimited? When you're debating your progressive friends, they think government should get bigger and bigger and solve more and more problems. You've got to ask them, where's the boundary? If the boundary's not in here, there is no boundary. The boundary comes when we're crushed under the absolute thumb of despotism and the economy goes broke. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18. Necessary and proper for carrying into execution any power we like. For carrying into execution the foregoing powers. So we have bookends in the Constitution. 1.1.1 says we're going to give you some powers. Article 1, Section 8 gives them the powers, and Clause 18 says we just gave you the powers. And just in case that wasn't clear enough, we have the 10th Amendment. That I call the backstop. In case a few wild pitches get by, the 10th Amendment says if the power wasn't given to the federal government by the Constitution, it is reserved to the states or to the people. We also know from the external evidence, which is the ratifying documents, the comments of the writers, and some other underlying documents. We have the notes of the convention, the Federalist Papers, the Anti-Federalist Papers. Anybody ever even hear of those? The Federalist Papers were written by people saying, let's ratify the Constitution. The Anti-Federalist Papers were written by people saying, no, it gives the federal government too much power. One of those anti-federalists was Patrick Henry. Now at the time, it looked like their fears were unfounded, but over time it looks like they might have had a reason for concern. And then we have the ratifying documents. James Madison was asked once what a clause in the Constitution meant. Most of you know that Madison is considered the father of the Constitution. He was there, presented many of the major ideas, including the Virginia Plan, debated all of them, and took copious notes. Became president of the United States. And so someone said, what does this mean? And he said, don't ask me. Well, who are we going to ask? He said, read the text. If the text isn't clear enough, go to the ratifying documents of the states, because that is where this document derives all of its power. So what does it mean now to promote? That's more perfect union, more perfect than the one we had, but still strictly limited.